What is up, guys? It's Fresh, back with another video. Today we have an episode of Malicious Compliance. I know we've had a weird schedule this week, but I promise we're getting back on track. I hope you enjoy. No phones at work? Okay, I won't communicate. Background. The nature of my job requires me to be in different parts of the facility at different times. There's a schedule in our shared Google Drive so you can easily find where I am scheduled to be. There are also phones in each of those places. We use our cell phones for email and text communications throughout the day. My boss is constantly having her secretary text us to relay info. Our company policy literally encourages the use of cell phones for work-related reasons. They don't provide devices to check emails, so really it's the most efficient way to communicate, rather than leaving your post to go to an office with a computer. My boss is a complete nutcase. She gets in these moods where everything pisses her off. 2 weeks ago, she was in one of her moods. She had her secretary email a schedule change to all of us employees. Then she walked in the room my coworker and I were in. My coworker was on her phone reading said email. The boss walked out with an annoyed look on her face. Like 5 minutes later, we get a passive-aggressive email from her saying, "There have been complaints that several of you are using your phones throughout the day. Per company policy, you are not to be on your phones. Thanks." I was totally confused, wondering if the policy had changed. So I looked up the policy, no change. Still said they encourage the use of phones for work purposes. I decided I could be just as ridiculous. She is the primary person who contacts us throughout the day anyway, so I began leaving my phone in my car. I check my email at 6:55 a.m. before I enter the building. She doesn't come in until 7:30 or so I don't get her emails until the end of the day. It's going on 2 weeks now. She can't be bothered to pull up the schedule file to get the room number when she needs to contact me, so she asks someone else to do whatever nonsense she needs done. It has proven to be far more stressful for her than for me. I secretly laugh when someone says, "Our boss sent an email about that," and I can reply, "Oh, I didn't see that because I don't have my phone." I'm anxiously awaiting the day that Big Boss asks me about it. This here is the absolute beauty of malicious compliance. OP is obviously not doing anything technically wrong, but she's doing just enough to dramatically inconvenience her boss. It's basically petty revenge with a bit of sinister intent all rolled up into one gorgeous subreddit. You want to call me a liar? Fine. Get somebody else to run your shop. This happened to me about 5 years ago when I worked for a fast food company in London. I'd been working there for about 2 years and worked my way up to branch team leader, which meant I was responsible for opening and closing the store, cashing up, stock ordering, etc. The company had this idea of doing away with branch managers and instead leaving branch team leaders to run the stores and reporting back to area managers. I turned up to an afternoon closing shift about an hour late once because I was stuck on a tube train after somebody had sadly jumped under a train. There was obviously no mobile signal and I had no way of contacting work to let them know I'd be late. When I did arrive, I logged onto the system and entered the reason why I was late and thought nothing more about it. I sent a text to the area manager about 10 minutes later to explain what had happened but received no reply. A few weeks later, I was invited for a disciplinary hearing with the area manager because of this. I wasn't too bothered because I knew that the employee handbook stated that you are only excused from phoning in absences of more than 15 minutes lateness if you could prove there were extreme circumstances involved. So I wrote a short statement explaining this and even printed a copy of the incident statement from the Transport for London website. I attended the meeting about a week later. We sat at a table in a windowless office as he had a list of questions in front of him and his assistant typed everything up on a laptop. I calmly explained the circumstances. I couldn't call or text anybody at the branch because I was 100 feet underground. The incident occurred while I was already underground, there was no Wi-Fi signal between stations, etc. All of my points were dismissed to the point that I was asked, "Why didn't you text me, the area manager, as soon as you arrived at the tube station?" Well, simply because the branch I was working at was inside the station and less than a 30-second walk from the tube escalator. It would have taken me longer to type a message explaining the circumstances than it would for me to have done it when I arrived. There were a few other silly suggestions like, "Why didn't you check the information board before boarding the train and notify me of the delay beforehand?" Because the poor soul hadn't jumped in front of the train at that point. I should add at this point that this company proudly advertised for about a year that they were supporting a suicide prevention charity. At the end of the meeting, he decided that he didn't think the circumstances were extreme enough, so gave me a written warning which would remain on my employee file for 2 years. Because of other factors, namely the low wage and 4-hour contract, I was thinking of leaving anyway, so I decided to inconvenience him as much as I could. This disciplinary hearing had been held on a Monday morning and had gone on for about an hour. The employee handbook said that employee meetings, including disciplinary meetings that are not held at your own branch, would entitle you to a statutory 90 minutes of pay each week, plus travel expenses. I was originally scheduled to open and close the shop every day that week from 8:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. This was always classed as overtime on top of my 4-hour contract. I told him that if he's calling me a liar and doesn't believe what I've told him, despite all the evidence, that I want to revert back to my 4-hour-a-week contracted hours. I then reminded him that I'd now done my 4 hours for the week, so he'll have to find somebody else to run the shop this week. His face dropped as he asked me to wait while he found staff to cover for the store because he knew there was nothing he could do. He frantically started phoning around other store leaders and deputy managers to ask if they can cover my branch for the week. None of them could. After he ended the 5th or 6th phone call, I asked if I could go now. He asked me to wait while he phoned one more person. It's no surprise that they couldn't do it either. He sat back in his chair and said, "Okay, what can I do for you to work these shifts?" I probably could have asked for double time, but I'm not an extortionist. I simply said, "Overturn this ridiculous decision to give me a written warning and I'll work as much as you want." His assistant shook her head and said, "It's already been submitted. I can't change it now." I just stared at him as I could see that he hadn't planned for this. After another 30 seconds of him texting somebody, I just got up and left, stating that I only want to carry out my 4-hour shifts until further notice. A few days later, I heard from a team member who I was good friends with that he'd had to have a branch team leader from the other side of London to open the shop at 7 a.m. so that she had time to open up before going on to her own store to open there, and then have a different branch team leader come and close the store once they'd closed theirs, with team members running the branch during the day. I went in for one 4-hour shift the following week just to see how much the branch had fallen behind with everything. I resigned after that and went on to work for another company which didn't have such an authoritarian outlook on staff. Seriously, if this branch manager didn't think that a man horrifically taking his own life on the subway as extreme enough of a circumstance for this employee to be an hour late to work once, he deserves every single logistical nightmare OP has in store for him, and honestly, a hell of a lot more. I forced my teacher into retirement by doing the chicken dance. When I was in 8th grade, I had the terrible misfortune of being put in the class of the most sadistic teacher in the school. We will call him Mr. M. Mr. M was known for liking to watch his students suffer. I have so many stories about things he would do just to assert power over us, like giving pop quizzes on subjects he didn't teach that were designed for us to fail, or making us call our parents and tell them we had no will to succeed and were committed to failure if we forgot an assignment. Basically, he was a prick who got off on watching kids squirm. Now, not only did I have Mr. M as my English teacher, I also had him for homeroom, which meant he was in charge of handing out our report cards at the end of the grading period. So, of course, being the kind of person he was, he took advantage of this. When he gave us our report cards, he would call us up one by one to receive them in front of the entire class. If a student had passed every class, he would make us all clap for them. If a student had failed one or more classes, he would make us walk back to our desk in complete silence. This made me livid. I am autistic and often struggled in school. I failed at least one class each grading period, and every time we got report cards, I dreaded being stared at. Eventually, I vented about this to my older sister, who happened to, at the time, be in college getting a degree in education to become a math teacher. She was disgusted by this, especially because, unbeknownst to me, sharing the status of a student's grades to their peers, positive or negative, without written permission is illegal. With her help coaching me on how to report him, I brought what he was doing to the attention of the school principal, who was furious at the news. She asked if I had other students who could confirm he was doing this. I did, in fact. A good chunk of the class was happy to let administration know about everything Mr. M had been up to. I still didn't know how the principal handled the situation, but he definitely got at least a good talking to because he never did it again. However, I guess word got to him that I was the one who had brought up the initial complaint, because for the rest of the school year he was out to get me. Fast forward to the end of the year. As the teacher who had been at the school the longest in our year, Mr. M was in charge of organizing the 8th grade field trip. It was tradition that every year he would force the 8th grade class to do the chicken dance and film it. He even made us watch the footage of the previous year so that we knew it was coming. The day of the field trip comes, and it isn't that special. We got to miss class, go to the park, and eat pizza. As the day comes to a close, we hear the teachers announce that we have 5 minutes to make it back to the pavilion. Me and most of the other students start running back across the field, knowing they'd be serving the pizza soon. Halfway across the field, my foot gets caught in a hole in the ground and I feel a snap from my ankle. I start wailing and my friend sees me and helps me to my feet and half carries me back to the pavilion, me sobbing the whole way. She sets me down on a bench and I prop my ankle and she runs to tell a teacher that I was hurt, but before she can say anything, she's cut off by Mr. M announcing that it's time to do the chicken dance. She goes to a teacher and is blown off and ignored and told to join the other students or she'll be written up. At some point while lining up the students, Mr. M notices that I'm still sitting in the pavilion on a bench and marches over demanding that I get up. I tell him that I hurt my ankle and that I think it's broken. He takes one look at my sock-covered foot and says I'm lying. I tell him I can barely stand. He demands that I get up or he will make sure that I'm put in isolation for the remaining week of middle school. Eventually, I give in and I hobble down the hill with everyone else, sobbing and limping. The whole time he makes us dance, I make a show of it, tears streaming down my face, me pitifully trying to dance on one leg, holding onto people for balance, the whole 9 yards. Eventually, after about 30 seconds, one of the teachers comes over and stops me and asks what's going on. I tell her I think my ankle is broken. She asks, if it's broken, why are you trying to dance? I tell her how Mr. M threatened me and that I just wanted to spend the last week of school with my friends. She guides me away and sits me down. By this time, my ankle is starting to swell considerably. I pull off my sock and she can see the skin starting to turn a purple bruise color. She's horrified and helps carry me back to the bus and gets me some ice. When the rest of the students get on the bus to leave after eating, they pass me in the first row, my broken ankle elevated on the seat. The teacher who helped me, we'll call her Miss A, sits with me the whole ride back to the school, and her and another student help me get to the nurse. My mom leaves work early to get me and take me to the emergency room where they confirm my ankle is indeed broken, a pretty nasty break too. The next Monday, she brings me into school and we head straight for the office and demands to see the principal. She has me tell her the whole story. My friend and Miss A corroborate, and my mother immediately threatens to hire a lawyer and sue for abuse and endangerment. After an hour of motherly tirade, the principal manages to calm my mother down and says it will be taken care of. In the meantime, I take the day off and stay home. I walk into homeroom Tuesday morning on my crutches, and Mr. M isn't there. In fact, he didn't come back for the last week of school. I find out through the grapevine that he retired early, and I know the administration probably made him in order to avoid a lawsuit. Mr. M was not that old, maybe about 50, and could have easily gotten another 10 years in before he retired. Still, to this day, I have chronic pain in my ankle, and I even have to walk with a cane at times. But honestly, I'm just happy knowing that asshole never got to subject another class full of kids at that school to his sadism again. Now, while not to the extreme of making a girl with a broken ankle dance through her pain, I definitely had a teacher in high school that sounds a lot like Mr. M. He seemed to take great enjoyment out of mocking students or making students feel some kind of pain. In the math class that I had with him, he would verbally abuse people and ridicule them in front of the entire class. I'm not sure if it made him feel good to tell students that they would be failures, or if he just did it to try and get a cheap laugh from the class. Either way, it seems that there's more than one Mr. M in this world. In fact, likely many. That doesn't change the fact, however, that there really shouldn't be any. No exceptions? No exceptions. I never appreciated the saying, penny wise, pound foolish, until I started working for my current company. I could start up a new subreddit for it and fill it with stories of PWPF from these guys alone. We work 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. Some work 7 to 5 and take off early on Friday. Others work a bit later, 9 to 6. Some show up 5 to 15 minutes late and stay another 5 to 15 minutes. If there's a deadline looming, it's not uncommon to see people in the office at 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 10 p.m., or even later. We're all honest about our hours, not that it truly matters as we're all salaried. We make sure we work the overall hours we're supposed to. No one relies on us to be available, but we all have our contact info available if we are needed anyway. For the most part, it works nicely. People are happy and work gets done. Most people are happy, I should say. The bosses. They're never happy. They don't like the flex hours we've grown accustomed to and want to put a stop to it. Not too long ago, a memo was sent out, quote, "Our business hours are 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. every day. Everyone is expected to be here at 8 a.m. and leave at 5 p.m. No exceptions." John, who drives through the worst traffic in North America, no exaggeration, was a fan of the flex hours. Coming in an hour late and staying an hour late meant he was sitting in lighter traffic each way. Mary, who has a toddler, would be in a few minutes late because of said toddler. Daycare, dressing the kid, feeding the kid, whatever it was. Having a few extra minutes was helpful. Myself, I was good with the 8 to 5. Sometimes I'd be a bit late, sometimes I'd be here just on time. The 5 p.m. mark wasn't something I aligned myself with. I'd routinely stay late to get some extra work done or to get ahead. Some nights I'd work at home too. No exceptions. They learned to hate those two words. We sure did, but we complied. Need to stay 5 minutes late to finish off this proposal that has a strict external deadline? Nope. 5 p.m. No exceptions. Wake up to bad traffic due to weather? Looks like I'll be late. Guess I'll work from home today. Or take a personal day. No exceptions. Meeting running late? Sorry, it's 5 p.m. No exceptions. I felt horrible one morning. Woke up a bit late. Later than I wanted to, and late enough that I would have been about 5 minutes late to the office. Was I sick? Yup. Sick enough to stay home from work? Probably not. I could have powered through it. And I wasn't contagious. But alas, I was going to be late. Called in sick. No exceptions. Client wants to visit at 7:30 a.m.? Nope, sorry. We're not available until 8 a.m. No exceptions. My personal favorite was when my boss yelled at me for not responding to his email on the weekend for something urgent. Sorry, it was outside of work hours. No exceptions. What was the email about? He wanted to know if I could go to a site visit that week, on Thursday at 7:30 a.m. Why that was urgent, I have no idea. And 7:30 a.m.? Sorry, outside of working hours. No exceptions. I'd like to finish this off by saying that this rule has been revoked. The bosses have seen their mistake, apologized for it, and reinstated our flex hours. But I can't. Despite having productivity and morale plummet, the bosses still have this rule in effect. Penny wise and pound foolish. And we comply. Maliciously. Now, while a boss's ability to control their employees and their workforce may be important under some circumstances to ensure productivity and quality of labor, this is not that kind of control. It's not control for the sake of efficiency. It's the control for the sake of control and only for the sake of control. The bosses don't care about the effect of their policy. They just cared that their rule, their law is being followed. They care that they are in power regardless of how it hurts them. They're literally cutting off their own nose to spite their face. Their actions were asinine and childlike at best, and hurting the national and local GDP at worst. What can you do?
Thank you to everyone who watched this video. Be sure to subscribe for more daily Reddit content. Drop a like if you liked the video, and I will see you all tomorrow.